Welcome back to Reformed Thinking. It is good to be here with you. We are looking at a stack of notes today that centers on one specific, very chaotic day in the life of Abraham.
That's a good way to put it. Chaotic.
We are opening up Genesis chapter 21, specifically verses 8 through 14.
And it really is a day that starts with a party and ends with, well, a deportation, a casting out.
Yeah, it's wild. And the sources we have today are looking at this through a very specific lens of Reformed theology. We're going to see how this one family drama basically sets the stage for some huge concepts like election and grace.
It really is a heavy text. I mean, you have to picture the scene. It begins with a feast, the weaning of Isaac, which is a moment of pure joy.
Right.
And it ends with a fracture so severe it splits the household apart forever.
It feels like a total roller coaster when you read it. You start with this scene of, celebration, a promise fulfilled, a child growing up, and by the end of the day, you have a woman and a boy wandering in the wilderness with almost nothing.
Just some bread and a skin of water. That's it.
And that's the scene. But the point we're going to keep coming back to is that this isn't just a domestic squabble. I think that is the mistake people make when they read Genesis. They see a family drama, like a reality TV show.
Yes. But this is the core conflict of the entire Bible playing out in one tent. It is a collision between the flesh and the spirit.
Right. The question at stake here isn't just who gets the bigger bedroom or something trivial like that.
No, the question is who will inherit the kingdom of God?
And the stakes are just incredibly high. We are going to be talking about some major doctrines today. We're going to see unconditional election in action.
We'll see the distinction between the covenant of grace and the covenant of works playing out with real people.
And honestly, we're going to see what some might call the necessary intolerance of grace.
That phrase might make people uncomfortable, the intolerance of grace. But it is essential. Grace cannot tolerate self-reliance. It just can't coexist with it. And that's what we are going to see in this passage.
Okay, let's unpack this. We start in verse 8. The child grew and was weaned. Now, for us today, weaning is just a thing that happens. Maybe you stop buying formula, you switch to solid food.
It's a quiet transition mostly.
But in the ancient Near East, this was a massive deal, wasn't it?
Huge. Absolutely huge. You have to remember the context of infant mortality in the ancient world. It was incredibly high. I mean, heartbreakingly high.
So just surviving was a big deal.
A child surviving to the age of 3, which is typically when weaning happened back then, was a major milestone. It meant the child had passed through the most dangerous years of infancy. It was a public confirmation that the heir was established. He was going to make it.
So when the text says Abraham made a great feast, this wasn't just a birthday party with some cake and balloons.
No, this was a covenant celebration. Think about what Abraham has endured up to this point. Years of waiting. Decades of, silence from God at times, the barrenness of Sarah, the shame of it.
The failed attempts to help God.
Right. And now look at the reality. God kept his word. The laughter that we saw back in Genesis 18. Remember when Sarah laughed in skepticism in the tent?
Yes, she laughed because it seemed impossible.
That same sound, laughter, has now been transformed. That skepticism has been turned into fulfillment.
I love the connection to the name Isaac. I mean, Yaakov literally means he laughs.
That is it. That's the whole point. The tent is now filled with laughter, but it's holy laughter now. It's the laughter of relief. It's the laughter of a promise that has actually physically come true. You can just imagine the atmosphere.
Oh,
the servants are celebrating. Sarah is beaming. Abraham is, I imagine, just profoundly relieved. The promise is visible. It's walking around. It's eating solid food.
So this isn't just, yay, no more breastfeeding. This is a political statement, in a way. It's Abraham telling the whole camp, the whole world, here is the heir. He survived the gauntlet. The line continues.
Right. And you have to realize, Abraham is over 100 years old. Sarah is 90. He has been living with the anxiety of who takes over when I die for decades. This feast is the exhale. It is the moment he can look around and say, God did it.
And here's where the tension just snaps. This very moment of fulfillment is what unveils the contest. It's like you can't have the promise established without the opposition revealing itself.
That is a principle you see all through Scripture. As soon as the promise is visible, the flesh resents it.
So let's look at that pivot point. It happens immediately, verse 9. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking.
Right. And notice how the text identifies him. It is so deliberate. It doesn't just call him Ishmael.
It says the son of Hagar the Egyptian.
The son of Hagar the Egyptian.
Why do you think that is? Is that just Sarah being petty, throwing shade?
It's more than pettiness, I think. The text itself is emphasizing his origin. It's reminding the reader and probably reminding Sarah of where he came from.
It's from the plan B.
Exactly. Go back to Genesis 16. Hagar was the plan B. She was the human scheme. Sarah and Abraham got impatient and tried to help God out by natural means. So Ishmael represents the best that human effort can produce. He is the son of the bondwoman. He is, in theological terms, the flesh.
And he is mocking. I want to stop here because I feel like the English translation mocking might be a little weak. It sounds like he's just teasing. What is happening in the Hebrew here?
Oh, this is one of the most powerful parts of the text. The word is mock. And if your ears are tuned to Hebrew, you hear the root word immediately. It's the same root as Yuck Isaac. The root is uck.
So wait, you're saying he was Isaacing?
Essentially, yes. That's a great way to put it. It's a play on words. Ishmael was Isaacing, but it's in what's called the Peel stem in Hebrew.
Okay, for those of us who skip Hebrew class, what does the Peel stem imply?
It implies intensive, repeated action. This wasn't just a one-time chuckle, and it definitely wasn't innocent play. Some modern commentators try to soften this and say, oh, they were just playing tag. But the grammar doesn't support that, and neither does the context. This was counter-laughter.
Counter-laughter, that's a potent phrase. What does that look like in the 10th? What's he doing?
Well, think about it. You have Isaac, who embodies the true laughter of God's grace. And then you have Ishmael, the mimic. He's about 14 years old at this point. He's a teenager.
He's not a little kid.
Not at all. And here is this toddler, Isaac, maybe 3 years old, getting all the attention as the heir. Ishmael is likely strutting around, maybe pantomiming what it means to be the heir, maybe acting like he's the firstborn who deserves all this. He is scoffing at the promise.
It's a direct challenge. It's rivalry.
It is absolute rivalry. And we don't have to guess about this because the Apostle Paul confirms it in the New Testament.
And Galatians.
In Galatians 4.29, Paul looks back at this exact event, and he doesn't call it teasing. He doesn't call it playing. He calls it persecution.
Okay, but let's push on that for a second. Calling it persecution feels like a stretch, doesn't it? I mean, he's a teenager making fun of a toddler. Is Paul really being fair in Galatians when he equates mocking with persecution?
It does sound extreme to our modern ears. We think of persecution as something physical, being thrown to lions.
Right.
But you have to look at the power dynamics in the tent.
Because Ishmael was the alpha for 14 years?
That is correct. For 14 years, he was the only son. He was the presumptive heir. Everyone assumed he would inherit Abraham's wealth and position. So he's not just teasing a baby. He's pantomiming the king. He's challenging the legitimacy of the transfer of power. It's political sedition wrapped in a joke.
So his whole identity is being threatened by this little kid.
His whole identity. He thought his father's effort and his mother's strength had secured the future, and now here comes this miracle baby born of a dead womb, purely by grace, and the flesh cannot stand it. It cannot tolerate grace.
So the flesh cannot tolerate the celebration of the Spirit.
Precisely. The legalist always hates the doctrines of grace because grace robs him of his boasting. If Isaac is the heir by promise alone, then Ishmael's strength, his firstborn status, his 14 years of history, it all means nothing. And that provokes mockery. It provokes persecution.
So Sarah sees this. She sees this counter-laughter, this Isaacing, and her reaction is immediate and severe. Verse 10. So she said to Abraham, "Cast out the slave woman and her son."
She doesn't mince words. There's no negotiation.
No, and that verb she uses, cast out, it's intense, right? It's not send them to their room.
It is. The Hebrew is garo. It's the same word used for divorce. It's the same word used for driving enemies out of a land during a conquest. It implies a permanent, violent severing.
A complete break.
Yes. She isn't saying, hey, Abraham, maybe Hagar and the boy should go live in the guest tent for a week. She is saying, get them out. Sever the tie. For good.
And her rationale is what's so interesting. She doesn't say he's being mean to my kid. She says, for the son of this slave woman shall not inherit with my son Isaac.
Right. Her logic is theological. She cuts right to the heart of the matter. Inheritance cannot be shared.
Okay, but why not? Why couldn't they just split the land? I mean, Abraham was rich. He had plenty of flocks, plenty of servants. Couldn't he have made it work?
Because the inheritance isn't just land. It's not just about flocks and herds. It's the covenant. It's the promise of being the line through which the Messiah, the Savior of the world, comes. It's the promise of being God's peculiar people. You cannot have that shared between the child of the flesh and the child of the promise. Co-inheritance would blur the line that God himself drew. You cannot blend promise with pragmatism.
This is really the antithesis we talk about so much in Reformed theology, the war in the tent.
It is the antithesis. It's the impossibility of mixing law, which Hagar and Ishmael represent, and grace, which Sarah and Isaac represent. You see, Sarah is acting as the guardian of the new covenant principle here. We often look at Sarah in the earlier chapters and we see her lack of faith, her scheming.
Yeah, she doesn't come off great.
But here she is the theologian of the house. She has a moment of absolute clarity. She realizes that if Ishmael stays, the principle of grace is compromised. It's like saying you can be justified 90% by Christ and 10% by your own moral effort. And Sarah says, no, absolutely not.
The bondwoman must go to protect the freedom of the heir.
That is the only way. There is no middle ground.
But Abraham, poor Abraham. Verse 11 says, and the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight, and it specifies on account of his son.
We have to pause here and feel the human cost of this.
Yeah.
Abraham isn't a theological robot. He is a father, and he loves Ishmael.
He does.
Remember back in Genesis 17? When God promised Isaac would be born, Abraham's first response was a prayer for Ishmael. He said, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. He wanted Ishmael to be the one. He had pinned his hopes on him.
He had raised him for 14 years. That's a lot of memories. That's a lot of bonding. He probably taught him to hunt, to manage the flocks. That's his boy.
Certainly. And this shows us that covenant administration, following God's will, often cuts right through our deepest human affections. It's not easy. Repentance isn't easy. Leaving behind the flesh isn't easy because we have affection for our own works. We like our Ishmaels. We raise them. They're familiar to us.
So Abraham is distressed. He is torn. And then God intervenes in verse 12. And honestly, God's response is surprising. You almost expect God to say, Sarah, calm down. Let's be reasonable.
You do. You expect him to mediate.
But he says, be not displeased. In all that Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice.
Listen to her voice. God validates the demand. He clarifies that while Sarah's tone might have been sharp, and calling Hagar this slave woman is certainly sharp, her theological instinct was 100% correct. The separation must happen.
And then God gives the reason. And this is the key dogma, isn't it? For in Isaac shall your seed be called.
This is the bedrock of the doctrine of unconditional election. It's stated so clearly.
Let's define that. What are we seeing here? What does that mean in this context?
We are seeing that biology does not equal inheritance. Abraham has 2 sons. Both are his biological offspring, but only one is the covenant seed.
So it's not about bloodline in a purely physical sense.
Not at all. God narrows the line. He bypasses the firstborn, which by ancient custom is the one who should get the double portion and the leadership, and he chooses the secondborn. He bypasses natural strength for miraculous promise.
It reminds me of Romans 9. Paul just hammers this point home.
It is Romans 9. Paul quotes this very verse. He says, it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted as the seed. This is crucial for us to understand today. Being born in a Christian family doesn't save you. Being baptized as an infant doesn't automatically save you. Being a nice person doesn't save you.
So what does?
What determines the inheritance is God's calling. In Isaac shall your seed be called. It's an act of God's sovereign choice.
Why is this doctrine of election so important for assurance? Because some people find it scary. They think, oh no, what if I'm not chosen?
I understand that fear, but it's actually the only thing that stabilizes faith. If the inheritance depended on my pedigree or my potential or my performance, I would be in constant terror.
Because you can always fail.
Because my performance fluctuates. I sin. I have doubts. But if the inheritance depends on God's calling, on his promise, then it is stable. It rests on him, not on me. My assurance is in his faithfulness, not my own.
Okay. So God closes the door on Ishmael being the covenant heir. But then we get to verse 13. God says to Abraham, and I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring.
Yes. And this brings us to the important doctrine of God's mercy and what we call common grace.
Let's distinguish those graces, because I think people get confused. They think if you aren't among the elects, then God just hates you and makes your life miserable from start to finish.
And that is not what the text says at all. We have to distinguish between special grace or covenant interest and common grace. Special grace belongs to Isaac. That's redemption. That's the messianic line. That's eternal salvation.
That's the inheritance.
That's the inheritance. But common grace belongs to Ishmael too. That's temporal survival. That's political nationhood. God promises to make him a great nation. That's earthly blessing, sunshine and rain.
So God distinguishes, but he isn't cruel.
He is not cruel. Election does not cancel God's benevolence as creator. Ishmael is Abraham's seed, and God honors that connection. He cares for the boy. We see that later in this very chapter when God opens Hagar's eyes to the well. He hears the boy crying. But, and this is the hard part for many, Ishmael is cared for, but he is not the heir.
It's a theological balance then. It's not all or nothing in that sense.
It is. We have to avoid universalism, which says everyone is an heir and there are no distinctions. That's not true. Isaac is the heir. But we also have to avoid a kind of deterministic cruelty that says God delights in the misery of the non-elect. He blesses Ishmael significantly on this earth, but the spiritual eternal inheritance is exclusive to the line of promise.
So Abraham hears this word from God. Listen to Sarah. Send them out. I will take care of Ishmael, but Isaac is the one. And now we get to the obedience of faith, verse 14. So Abraham rose early in the morning.
There is that phrase again, Wayakim Babukar.
We see that with the sacrifice of Isaac too, don't we?
Yeah.
In chapter 22.
Yes, it's a marker in Genesis. It indicates immediate, unquestioning obedience. There is no negotiation here. There's no, God, let me think about it for a few days. No delay. The Puritans used to have a saying, delayed obedience is disobedience. Abraham acts immediately.
But look at the provisions. This part always gets me. It feels so stark. He gives Hagar bread and a skin of water.
It is a stark contrast, isn't it? Just hours before, inside the tent, there was a great feast. Abundance, wine, meat, laughter, joy. Outside the tent, bread and a skin of water.
What's the significance of that meager provision? What's the theology there?
It's a picture of what the law, the covenant of works, can offer you. Hagar represents the law. And the law can give you the bare resources of survival. It can give you some bread and some water. It can tell you what to do. But its resources are finite.
It runs out.
It always runs out. Verse 15 tells us, the water was spent in the bottle. The resources of the flesh, of your own works, always run dry.
That is such a powerful image. The water was spent.
It always runs out. If you are trying to live by your own resources, by your own moral performance, your bottle will run dry in the wilderness. But the resources of the Father's house, where Isaac is, they're infinite. There's a well that never runs dry.
So he puts the burden on Hagar's shoulder.
Notice that detail. It's so specific. Ishmael is a teenager. He could have carried it, but the text says he puts it on her shoulder. The law places burdens on us that we cannot bear, and he sends her away. The Hebrew word is shelah. It's a formal dismissal, a final act.
And they wander in the wilderness of Beersheba.
The name Beersheba means well of the oath. It's deeply ironic. They are wandering near the place of the covenant oath, near the water, but they can't find it. Without the promise, the religious person wanders near the well but cannot find it. They are lost in the wilderness of legalism.
Wow. Okay, this brings us naturally to how the rest of the Bible receives this story, because we aren't just reading this in a vacuum. The Apostle Paul picks this up in Galatians 4, and he runs with it.
He does. And he treats it as a full-blown gospel allegory. This is fascinating because Paul isn't saying the history didn't happen. He absolutely acknowledges the history. But he says these things contain an allegory. They signify something deeper.
So break that down for us. Who is who in Paul's mind?
For Paul, Hagar corresponds to Mount Sinai. She represents the earthly Jerusalem, the system of slavery to the law. She's the covenant of works. Sarah, on the other hand, corresponds to the Jerusalem above. She is free. She represents freedom and grace.
And the persecution Paul talked about, he connects that directly back to Ishmael.
Yes. He who was born according to the flesh persecuted him who was born according to the Spirit. That aligns with Ishmael's mocking. Paul is fighting the Judaizers in Galatians. These were people coming into the church and saying, yes, believe in Jesus, but you also have to keep the ceremonial law. You also have to get circumcised. You also have to do these works to be fully saved.
Adding to the gospel.
And Paul says, that is the spirit of Ishmael. You're trying to bring Hagar back into the tent.
That's intense. So adding law-keeping to the gospel is, in Paul's mind, literally bringing Hagar back.
It is. It's trying to make the child of promise share the inheritance with the child of the flesh. And Paul's command to the Galatian churches is the exact same as Sarah's command to Abraham. Cast out the bondwoman and her son. You cannot have the inheritance if you are trying to keep the law for justification. The tent isn't big enough for both.
But there is a twist here, isn't there? When we look at this through the lens of Christology, because we talked about Isaac being the child of promise, but in the gospel, who actually gets cast out?
This is the great exchange. This is where the beauty of the gospel shines through these Old Testament shadows. Jesus is the true Isaac. He is the ultimate child of promise. He is the beloved son in whom the Father is well pleased.
But he wasn't kept safe in the tent.
No. Hebrews 13:12 says Jesus suffered outside the gate. He was cast out. He was treated like the slave. He was treated like the exile. He was treated like Ishmael. He was sent into the wilderness.
Why? For what purpose?
So that we who are naturally spiritual Ishmaels, born of the flesh, mockers of God by nature, so that we could be brought into the tent. He took the place of the exile so we could get the inheritance. He bore the thirst. Remember on the cross, I thirst. His water was spent so that we could drink living water that never runs out.
That changes everything. It means the casting out that Hagar and Ishmael experienced was a foreshadowing of what Christ would bear for us.
Precisely. The intolerance of grace fell on him so that the welcome of grace could fall on us.
So what does this mean for the listener today? How do we apply this? Because we don't have bondwomen in our houses to cast out, obviously.
No, but we have Ishmaels in our hearts.
What do you mean by that? Our own works.
Sins, idols, things we've nurtured, things that are born of the flesh. Maybe it's a specific sin you've been managing instead of killing. Maybe it's a reliance on your own professional success for your identity. Maybe it's a secret bitterness you're holding on to. These are the things we've produced by our own efforts.
And we love them, don't we? Just like Abraham loved Ishmael. It's hard to let them go.
We do. They are grievous to part with. We say, Lord, I'll serve you, but please just let this Ishmael live before you. Let me keep this one thing, this one habit, this one relationship. But the command is cast out.
Mortification of sin.
Ruthless mortification. You cannot just manage sin. You have to expel it. You have to cut off the supply lines. You have to send it into the wilderness and let it die there.
There's also an application for the church here, isn't there? For the institution.
Absolutely. The church must guard the gospel. We have to be like Sarah in this regard, as jarring as that sounds. We cannot allow the mockery of pragmatism or liberalism to share the inheritance with the pure gospel.
What does that look like in a practical sense?
It looks like people saying, well, the Bible is great, but we really need modern psychology to fix people.
Yeah.
Or the gospel is nice, but we need political activism to really change the world. That is bringing Hagar into the tent. That is saying the promise isn't enough. We need human effort too.
It's Ishmael's logic.
It's Ishmael's logic, and the church has to say, no, cast out the bondwoman. The tent is not big enough for works and grace to be co-heirs.
And finally, for personal assurance, I think this is where we land. This is the comfort in this hard story.
It is. If you are resting on the promise, on Christ alone, you are safe in the tent. You are Isaac. You belong. You don't have to worry about being cast out because Christ was cast out for you. Your place is secure.
But if you are resting on your bottle of water, your own performance, your good quiet times, your ministry success, your moral record,
it will run dry. It always does. And you will be left thirsty and alone in the wilderness, wondering why God seems so far away.
So the call then is to stop trying to blend the two lines. Stop trying to have it both ways.
Stop trying to be justified by your works. Trust solely in the God who calls the things that are not as though they were. Trust in the laughter of Isaac, which is the joy of the finished work of Christ.
This has been a deep dive into a text that, on the surface, looks like a messy, tragic family story. But underneath, it's the very structure of our salvation.
It is the movement from the feast to the separation, and we have to see that the separation is necessary for the joy of the feast to be preserved. You can't have both.
Here is a final thought for you to chew on as you go about your week. We often think of intolerance as a bad word. We want to be inclusive, open, and welcoming.
And in many ways, we should be.
But in the gospel, the intolerance of grace is actually our salvation.
That's right. If God allowed the bondwoman to stay, if he allowed our works to share the inheritance, we would all remain slaves to the law. By insisting on the heir, by insisting on the exclusivity of Christ, he secures our freedom. The door is narrow, but inside there is a feast.
Thank you for joining us on Reformed Thinking. We'll see you next time.
Grace and peace.